Hi, I'm Matt with Schematical, and today we're talking about CloudFront, how to use that with Terraform. What is CloudFront? Well, CloudFront is Amazon Web Services CDN, Content Delivery Network. CloudFront, which is over there for those of you guys following along at home, is a CDN. A CDN basically serves up static content. So if you don't know what static is, static and dynamic. Dynamic is like a web page that changes based on who just posted the latest meme or whether or not you're logged in, who you're logged in as. That's dynamic content. Static content is things that don't change regardless of who you are. So things like CSS, JavaScript, a lot of times HTML for templates, that stuff doesn't typically change. The backend data may change that comes from the API, that's dynamic, but those images, like the site logo, the CSS that tells you where things are loaded, all that stuff is static typically. And it changes when you deploy, but not all that frequently. So we don't need we don't want to waste computational cycles figuring out, hey, should we do A, B, and C with this thing? It's pretty much public stuff, public information, and we want it to load as fast as possible. So what we do is we put it on a CDN. And that CDN, a lot of times, exists in what's called an edge network. Normally, we put stuff in the VPC. You can see private subnets, public subnets. This, we want to exist as close to the user as possible because it doesn't actually need to pull from any of our centralized data like database records of user interactions, etc. So we put that on an edge network. Now, AWS does all that for us really nicely. They have a great CDN where all these ISPs all over the place have static copies of your content sitting there ready to go. And also because it doesn't change, you don't want to invalidate it, holds on to it for a while. I can go off about invalidations and all that other stuff, but let's get to the meat and beans of this thing. All right, let's look at assets.prod.schematical.com. So this is where the assets for schematical.com are stored. The CSS, the images you see on schematical.com. Most of the stuff, there's not really a lot dynamic to that site right now. So I started using Calendarly. And it pulls from an S3 bucket. So I've got an S3 origin that I can edit here, selecting a bucket. And if you look at my build pipeline videos, you actually could see, I think in that one, I push up static assets to the S3. I'm not sure which site I did. But yeah, so I pushed up a bunch of static assets to this S3 buckets. Now, you might want to just use S3, and you can. The thing is, it's not as cost effective per view, and it's not as fast. So, because S3 objects can change more often, the CDN doesn't expect it to change as much. So your website ideally doesn't change every 2 seconds, or at least you'd be using dynamic data at that point, or an API endpoint, but not your static assets. I'm going in circles here. We also can have a path, and you can do ACLs here. So, of course, for those of you guys that aren't aware, make sure that you don't have cross-site scripting attacks. I could do a whole video on that. Leave a comment if you want me to do that. Let's go on. So that's the origin. Then you got the behavior. We've got 3 levels of behavior right here. Pretty simple stuff. The default does most of the regular stuff. So you've got your origin there. And you can basically say, HTTP and HTTPS. We want to, have both of those work here, or redirect HTTP to HTTPS. If you want to be slightly more secure, which methods do you want? I'm actually not sure why I did all methods there. I know options is important, but I think I made it all so it'd be a little more versatile. Feel free to change that in the script if you'd like to. We're not doing anything fancy here with CloudFront signed for this particular module. I do that for everything on Drawn by AI, though. That is a user-generated image, by the way, so that way their images are secure. I can do a whole other video on CloudFront signed URLs if you'd like. Leave a comment, and I'd be happy to do it. We don't have anything fancy here. You can change things based on query strings and cookies. So if you wanted to have different content served up, you could use a Lambda Edge function and have that run in there and do a bunch of fancy stuff. But we're not doing that here. This is pretty basic stuff just for a static website that you want to be cost efficient and fast. And here's where you're setting your caching. So right now, anything caches for an hour, and after an hour, it'll check the S3 bucket, which will limit the amount of times the S3 bucket gets called and speed up the whole process. And here's where you set some functions, but we're not going to do that in this one. All right, let's take a look at the module. So if you go to github.com/schematical/sc-terraform, and you look for the CloudFront module, this is it. I will also link it in the show notes. Variables we're passing in, what are the service name? Pass in your own service name, whatever you want to call it. Pass in the region you want, so which bunker in Amazon do you want it to live in? The env, is it dev, is it prod, is it staging, etc. The VPC, if you don't know what a VPC is, check out my other videos on the VPC module, which plugs directly into this. I know because they work together in production on a couple different projects. And the private subnet mappings from the VPC module. And then the subdomain. What do you want the subdomain to be if there is one? Schematical.com, dev.schematical.com, etc. And yes, that does exist. Go there only if you want to see my work in progress. Core is allowed hosts, so this is all the different hosts that can access it. Not super important for static assets, except I will tell you, so this you wouldn't think is all that important typically with most JavaScript type stuff, JavaScript, CSS, all those things there. But this header is very important when you're running AI in the browser. For example, I'm running YOLO, which is an object recognition algorithm, which will run in the browser, and it needs to load JSON that then loads several binary models. And in order to get that JSON across, you need to have the right CORS header. So it is important in some aspects, and it protects people from cross-site scripting attacks. That's probably not supposed to be there. I'm going to edit that out.
A few moments later.
Hosted zone name, hosted zone ID, that's so you've got your Route 53 zones that you've registered your domains with, and an ACM cert, so that way it can do HTTPS. ACM is the AWS's cloud cert manager, so that manages your HTTPS certs and all that stuff. Make sure it renews for you. Oh, it's phenomenal. Love it. All right, let's go through the main script right here. We've got an AWS bucket we're defining. This is where the stuff goes that is going to get copied out to the CDN. So just put in your static CSS stuff during your build phase. Here, we're going to give it some ownership controls, basically what can write to it, what can read to it, read from it, sorry. Here's some local variable. This is what you saw, that's the same name as my origin. I probably should make that dynamic, but it really doesn't matter unless you have multiple origins. So unless you're getting real fancy, I wouldn't worry about it. If you are, leave a comment or jump on Discord and bug me, and I'll go ahead and edit this. Or if you're real fancy, make a pull request. I do like it when people contribute. AWS CloudFront origin access control. So this is all the usual stuff here. What gets signed for, how the signature protocol works. Again, don't really worry about this if you're just trying to get a static website up. And to really customize this is beyond the scope of this video, but that's okay. All right, ACL bucket public access. So here we're turning out a lot of public stuff. So basically people can't go directly to the S3 URL and gather this information. They will have to go through CloudFront, which will be faster and more cost efficient for you. Here, the AWS CloudFront response headers policy right here, basic core stuff, allows all headers right now. I could make this customizable. I could make this customizable. We wanted to, but I haven't yet. Again, this is kind of a simple first pass. This is a work in progress. It is in production though. It will work, again, for a static one. And here's the allowed host right there. Here's the CloudFront distribution. So again, the distribution, it has the caching rules and basically says which behaviors the the public facing URL for CloudFront how it behaves. Right here, default root object. This is real nice if you're doing a static HTML website. If you're doing something like Next.js and you want to get real fancy with that, this is not that. This is a step simpler than that. So if you're like yelling at me right now, well, Next does that, both two very nice frameworks. This is not for that. This is for some very basic stuff. Aliases. So I only have one alias right now. Basically my subdomain and my hosted zone name. The default cache behavior right here. It does allow all these, and again, up here my CORS only allows one, so I think that's a bit overkill, but it's not costing you anymore, so that's fine. Forwarded values, forwards query string values. We don't forward any cookies. We don't care what cookies say because we're not doing anything dynamic where we need to A/B test this. I once did an A/B testing where we did use cookies to dynamically determine which version of the website, the static HTML, to return. So this is useful when you're doing A/B testing. If that's something you want to do, again, leave a comment or jump on the Discord or somehow bug me, and I will happily help you with that. Min TTL, if that allows the minimum time that we can specify that things should live before they expire, before they time out. Default TTL is an hour, which is usually what it hits at, and the max TTL. So that's how long it lives on the CDN before it goes back and refreshes it from S3. And here, geo restrictions, none. Right now, I don't have enough traffic to bother with this, but if you had a problem, I've had other clients where they've been getting hit and DDoS from different countries and whatnot, and they've actually restricted even this Normally you want to restrict your API because it uses more cost. But this one, you can restrict it by geo here if you'd like to. Tags, pretty simple stuff just for classifying what you're looking at. And the certificate, which is my ARN. And so that's just basically, here's the HTTPS certificate for Schematical or whatever. So this basically creates an AWS Route 53 record that points to the CloudFront distribution. And it exists at the hosted zone, which in my case was schematical.com, and then whatever subdomain, www.schematical.com, staging.schematical.com, which isn't actually a thing. Don't bother going there. dev.schematical.com if you want to see what I'm doing before I release it. So that is the meat and beans of this thing. And of course, we've got our outputs right now, just the S3 bucket, but I probably could add some other things in there. So if you guys want me to add in, say the permissions or something like that, so you can add more stuff to it in the outputs, go ahead and bug me and I'll go ahead and do that for you. Leave a comment. Let's see. And I say bug me, I do appreciate your comments. All right, let's go ahead and see it in action. So we're going to schematical.com and we want to look at what an individual environment pretty much looks like. And I know you could use workspaces, which makes a lot of sense. In production for a big company, I would do that. My setup's so small that I don't split out environments for workspaces for this project, for schematical internal stuff. For other stuff, please, by all means, create a workspace for each environment. That makes a lot of sense there. All right, so here, first thing we've got is a module that the service name is schematical. Oh my God. A module with the service name is schematical-com-v1. And the source, again, you should, I'd actually, outside of this, I'd reference it by the Git URL. I can help you with that. If you have questions, I reference it in different places like that. This is inside the module, so I'm just referencing it by its static, relative path name. And the region and the environment are all pretty simple. And then this one's assets-environment. So assets-prod, etc. And then the VPC ID from the VPC module, the private subnet mappings from the VPC module, the hosted zone ID, which you've created when you pretty much registered the zone with Route 53, the hosted zone name, which is in this case schematical.com, the ACM cert, which is a cert that you've got to provision typically manually. And actually, I've never tried to do an ACM cert dynamically with Terraform. That would be a good experiment to run. If you know the answer to if you can create an ACM cert with Terraform, leave an answer in the comments. I'd be curious. API gateway. So here we're passing an API gateway ID. Again, mainly that's probably not even needed. I should probably remove that. Code pipeline, artifact, bucket store. So this is just where to store stuff from the code pipeline. Again, probably not needed. I can cut that out. Cores host, and so this is going to be any host name that we want to allow through, an array of host names more specifically. But yeah, that's pretty much how that module works. All right, so that is how to use CloudFront with Terraform on AWS. There are a million ways to do it. That is a simple one. Again, I mentioned some frameworks like Next.js with React, or is it Nest? I've worked with both of them, and they're one letter off. It'll confuse you. Either way, if you wanted something more fancy with signing, so only certain people could view certain things, like, for example, restricted images, that's not included in here. If you wanted edge network, A/B testing, that's not included in here yet either. If you want that, though, please reach out and talk to me. I update these scripts. Additionally, I consult on this stuff. So if you're a startup or a big company and you want help figuring out how to do your infrastructure as code and make it scalable and fast and cost efficient, that's my bread and butter. Please feel free to reach out to me, schematical.com. I've got my hat here. And or if you're looking to learn this, or we've got some people on staff that could benefit from some group coaching, they're not ready for me to jump in and go G.I. Joe on it. Feel free to check out my group coaching stuff, which is also on schematical.com as well. And if you found this content helpful, please subscribe, comment. I don't know, perhaps spread the word. Feel free to reach out to me on Discord. That's probably the easiest place to find me. So, without further ado, I'm Matt with Schematical, and thank you for watching.